Okay, thank you. As indicated, this is our fourth and last session of the spring 2021 SWA school. This is but a small step in the long march ahead of us. Study is essential for our advancement. Our school is a major resistance action against the system that oppresses us. As I've said before, for those of us who are religious, who study the Bible or the Quran or other religious texts in search of salvation, this is good. We now need to be as committed to studying politics and economics in search of liberation. That's right. Without this kind of study, the working class won't be able to do what must be done. Yeah, it's true. To change this society is hard work. First, we need to review what we've covered. Everyone has not been on every session. And remember also, as Ajamu pointed out, the sessions have been taped and are available for more study. Then we will turn to the major conceptual framework for where we are going and how we are going to get there. This is the content for the title of this presentation, Strategy and Tactics for the Anti-Capitalist Struggle. It's important to have a deep understanding of these two terms, strategy and tactics. This entire school has been an answer to this question in theory and in practice. What does it mean to be anti-capitalist? The first distinction we have to make is between a spontaneous movement and one based on class-conscious workers. The difference is fighting against only the symptoms of a problem versus sustaining a fight to the root cause of the problem. So the first issue is to know what capitalism is. Unemployment, poverty, and a host of other issues we can deal with are the main symptoms of capitalism as our problem. But we need to understand more than this. We need to get down to the fundamentals, the basic structure of the system. A major focus is on us, our social reality as the working class. We need to be clear about who we are and how we can unite. Unite in our workplaces, in our cities, and most of all as a class everywhere we are. We then need to be clear on how the social contradictions between the capitalist and working classes are concentrated in the government and its laws. Finally, we need a plan for our struggle. Okay, let's go a little bit deeper on all of this. In the first session of our school, we dealt with this question. How do we know what capitalism is? We live in it every day, but we have to have concepts, words that clarify our thinking. And later you can review our pamphlet, What is Capitalism and How to Fight It. For now, check these 5 concepts: private property, labor, government, profit, and classes. The fundamental point here is that capitalism is a specific kind of class society in which the capitalist owns the means of production, specifically the tools, technology, and natural resources. The vast majority of us are forced to sell our labor power as a commodity in exchange for wages. They make profit off our labor because we don't get the value of what we produce, they do. So the result is a class system in which the 1% owns the vast majority of wealth over the rest of us. Specifically, according to government data, the top 1% of Americans have a combined net worth of over $34 trillion, or over 30% of all household wealth in the US, while the bottom 50% of the population holds about $2 trillion combined. That's less than 2% of all wealth. This, as you can clearly see, is the polarity of class wealth under capitalism. In the second session of our school, we focused on our class, the working class. We are in history, and we change as the production forces and production relations change over time. Even as far back as 1848, Marx and Engels said this in their tract, The Communist Manifesto. The bourgeoisie has stripped of its halo every occupation hitherto honored and looked up to with reverent awe. It has converted the physician, the lawyer, the priest, the poet, the man of science into its paid wage laborers. Now today, here's what the economist Michael Zweig has to say. And I'm quoting, "We should identify the class divisions as between the working class, 62% of the US labor force, a substantial majority of the American people, and the corporate elite or capitalist class, who make up only 2%. In between these classes is the middle class, 36%. The working class are those people with relatively little power at work: white-collar bank tellers, call center workers and cashiers, blue-collar machinists, construction workers and assembly line workers, pink-collar secretaries, nurses, home healthcare workers, skilled and unskilled, men and women of all nationalities, races, and sexual preferences. The working class are those with little personal control over the pace or content of their work and without supervisory control over the work lives of others. There are nearly 90 million working class people in the United States labor force today. The United States has a substantial working class majority." Following this, in our third session, we turn to the main instrument of class control, the government, what we call the state. The political basis of the government in the United States, its theory of democracy, is, quote, consent of the governed, end of quote. This is included in the Declaration of Independence. Now let me quote that. Quote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness," end of quote. This declaration is the basis of our resistance, in their own words. The more class conscious we become, then, the more we can demonstrate that they do not have our consent to rule over us as they do. And this slide shows the police suppressing democracy in the 1960s on the right and then today. Now on to our current fourth session of our school on strategy and tactics. The first question is, what is strategy? The direct answer is that a strategy is a plan of action or policy designed to achieve a major or overall aim. One way to answer this is about a broad jump in a track meet. Can you go farthest doing a standing broad jump or a running broad jump? By analogy, each step in the run is a tactic, a specific action that moves you closer to your goal. That's the relationship between strategy and tactics. So at the bottom of the slide, the key phrase in each case is once and for all. A tactical move is to fight for 15 hourly minimum wage. But that will not end poverty once and for all. Building unions will not end capitalism once and for all, but both are necessary tactics now. Both get the working class in motion around demands they understand and are willing to fight for, at least be in the struggle to fight. And strategy involves vision. It involves projecting a future worth fighting for. This is not about what the capitalists say is good for us. They lie. They want us to lower our goals to what they can live with. Our position has to be to hell with what they can live with. Our focus is on our own lives. We need a real strategy for sustainable goodness for all of us. Our happiness is what concerns us. In ideological terms, the fundamental political theory we are discussing is the relationship between reform and revolution. See, in political theory, we have to get our minds straight on these isms. Reforms can take us step by step toward our final goal. Then there is reform as an end in itself, something we call reformism. So the reforms we need are reforms within a strategy designed for fundamental social change. Some people want a revolution. That's all they talk about. acting like all reform is reformism. This we call a left error, living in the future with no feet on the ground in the present. On the other hand, reformism does exist. A good example of reformism is thinking that changes within one of the capitalist political parties will be the change we need. This is a right error. The key relationship is always between reform and revolution. History proceeds through time. Sometimes things develop over a long time, sometimes in a very short time. Sometimes there is a fight for reform after reform, sometimes with success and sometimes not. Then that magical moment happens and a leap can take place. It's like boiling water. The water keeps getting hot, but then it bursts into steam, or in the opposite direction, ice. This is the relationship between quantity and quality. In the history of political economy, the anti-capitalist goal has often been referred to as socialism. Here's what Einstein, the famous scientist, said about it. I'm convinced there is only one way to eliminate these grave evils, namely through the establishment of a socialist society accompanied by an educational system which would be oriented towards social goals. In such an economy, the means of production are owned by society itself and are utilized in a planned fashion. A planned economy, which adjusts production to the needs of the community, would distribute the work to be done among all those able to work and would guarantee a livelihood to every man, woman, and child. The education of the individual, in addition to promoting his own innate abilities, would attempt to develop in him a sense of responsibility for his fellow men in place of the glorification of power and success in our present society. End of quote. Now, the dominant discussion by the political mainstream in this country goes nuts whenever positive discussion of socialism comes up. But what do we think about this? Check the survey data on the slide. Yeah, following the mind control the capitalists have in place, all demographic groups have majority positive views of capitalism. Okay, but check the views on socialism. A majority of Blacks and Latinos approve. Let me say that again. A majority of Blacks and Latinos approve. And check the rest of it. The less money you make, the less education you have, and the younger you are, then the more you are in favor of socialism. Okay, but now in our school, we need to turn away from these isms and focus on our immediate situation. What are the strategic tools we need, on the real? One way to sum this up is that we need 4 basic things: a vision, goals, what we're fighting for, an organization to unite us, clarity about leadership, and a plan of action. Clearly, we advocate a 2-step. On the one hand, the established move for workers at the workplace and at the industrial level is to form a union. This is a weak spot on the labor front in the South. We don't have as many unionized shops as we need, and this damned half-heartedly rule needs to be smashed, because even when we get a union, we don't always have all the workers involved. The main thing is that we advocate organization. Any form that's possible. Workers need organization. Our main organizational tactic is to form a workers' assembly on a citywide basis. Yes, each workers' assembly will become part of our network, making up the Southern Workers' Assembly. The South has been the most economically and politically backward area of our country, but when the South moves, the country wakes up. Our strategy speaks to this. We started out by referring to 5 key aspects of capitalism: property, labor, government, profit, and classes. We have a strategic vision about all of this. This is a future we can get excited about, one we can use to inspire our entire class, the working class. We aim to move from a capitalist-controlled political economy to one controlled by workers. We have been controlled, and our goal is to have control. We must be masters of our own fate. We aim to move from being unorganized to being fully unionized, united in our capacity for full collective bargaining, a process in which we have power. We aim to end this plutocracy, rule by the rich and powerful, to dual power, when the workers have enough power to end the unchallenged power of the capitalist class. We aim to end the use of surplus value appropriated for the personal use of the capitalist, to put it instead to the purpose of the public good, focusing on life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for all of us. We aim to end this class system based on exploitation to one based on cooperation. In fact, this extends from the economy to all aspects of society. Okay, that's what we want. So what? Who are we? Why do we matter? Clearly, as isolated individuals in small groups, we are not a formidable force, but when we unite, we change the political landscape. Our focus is on uniting workers, is on building power bases in every city, in every state, the power of the working class. The foundation of our movement is workplace organizations. Where the unions exist, we support them. And where they are being built, we join in solidarity. We did this with the Bessemer Amazon struggle, and that struggle continues. The main issue, fundamentally, is the organization of workers. We go further than that because there are social forces we must unite with. Our movement to unite workers also has the strategic goal of uniting with the Black liberation movement, the Latinx liberation movement, the women's liberation movement as the main allies. This reflects their quantitative and qualitative importance. But because we unite with all forms of oppression and exploitation, we also stand in unity with the struggle of our aging brothers and sisters, our LGBTQ brothers and sisters, our comrades from all oppressed nationalities, and so many others. The more unity we can build, the more power we will have. To do this, we need leaders. We got to be clear about this. We don't need people who get the big head, who think of themselves as better than and above the rest of us. No, we need real people who want to build a real movement. That means respecting and working with us, listening to us, and helping us sum up and build a consensus that realizes our class consciousness. And check this slide. Lao Tzu places a challenge before all of us as leaders. A leader is best when people barely know she exists. And when her work is done, her aim fulfilled, they will say, "We did it ourselves." Then there's this quote from Eugene Debs that makes sense about leadership. I want to quote it. "I'm not a labor leader. I don't want you to follow me or anyone else. If you were looking for a Moses to lead you out of the capitalist wilderness, you will stay right where you are. I wouldn't lead you into the promised land if I could, because if I led you in, someone else would lead you out. You must use your heads as well as your hands and get yourself out of your present condition. As it is now, the capitalists use your heads and your hands." In other words, we all must aspire to leadership of our class. Leadership is an organizational role, a role with a purpose. The tactical purpose of leadership is to help build our collectivity. First, the focus at workplaces we have identified as building small groups, what we call committed cores. This is a circle of brothers and sisters who have united around a consensus about the problems being faced with a broader strategic framework like the ones we have been discussing in these school sessions. The committed core knows the risks, knows what's at stake, and is prepared to throw down and take action. The committed core must do outreach to connect with others, but they will still be a minority, a relatively small part of the overall labor force in any given workplace. That's really all we need. A militant minority can move our politics forward the way we want. Now, one of the great tools we have is a slogan. The slogan is always in short words, like poetry, a powerful message in a few words. This is often the result of incredible creativity by people when they get into the struggle, being able to sum up the issues and put them in such a way that people understand, that people connect the slogan with their own thinking and can make it their own. When the masses grab hold of a slogan, they aren't quoting anybody else. The slogan becomes their voice. A slogan has to be understood in context, as pointed out here on the slide. At the beginning, a slogan has educational value. We have to break it down, get into the definition of words, share data, especially key statistics that make the problem clear. This is when the slogan has an educational function. Then there's also the agitational function of a slogan, raising it in the context of meetings, mass gatherings, in order to build a consensus. Like advertising, the more people hear it, the more they get comfortable with it and feel like it belongs to them. And then finally, the slogan becomes a focus for mass action. This is when we fight for its realization. Yes, indeed. Mass action is how we exercise the power of the working class. These companies don't exist without us. The buses don't run, the mail isn't delivered, the goods are not produced, the restaurants don't serve. Nothing works without us. They're trying to get the robots to take our place so they don't have to pay us. The problem with this strategy is that if they don't pay us, then nobody will have the money to buy what the robots make. Proof, there goes their profits. They got a problem. We protest in mass action for three main reasons. First, to educate and inspire people to join us. Second, to build power as an organizational strategy. Sometimes this means disruption to measure how much power we have at any given time. And third, to force the capitalists to change, to impose our will. The critical issue is how our mass action tactics are steps on our long journey for social transformation. When we win in one workplace, we will realize we need all the workplaces. When many take action, we realize we need a functional network, specifically in a workers' assembly. We will realize the need for our regional network to be brought together into the Southern Workers' Assembly. Workers united in motion, but we will need even more than this. For starters, especially in the South, we need to connect the workers' movement with the Black liberation movement. Only by accepting the legitimacy of the organic fighting forces of Black people rising up in defense of their community, only by accepting their right to self-determination can be realized the revolutionary meaning of the slogan, Black and white, unite and fight. Racism is one of the main tools of the capitalist class used to keep the working class divided. This is a foundation for false consciousness. If white workers are taught that Black people are their main enemy, then the capitalist class can hide and continue to rob them of the surplus value. In fact, they can bribe white workers by paying them a little more, giving them a little promotion here or there, petty privileges. But none of this ends the class exploitation of both Black and white workers. This is a dialectical process of fighting racism within the workers' movement and then joining with the Black community in fighting racism in the society as a whole. A good example is the March on Washington in the 1960s. It was advanced with the generous support of the United Auto Workers. Now is the time to transform all trade unions into social justice organizations. But again, more is needed. The workers' movement needs to unite with the Latinx liberation movement. Two critical issues are involved. We have the need for a full revision of the immigration policies. No worker is an alien in this country of mainly immigrants. Capitalism recognizes no borders for itself as it roams all over the world as imperialism, as the World Bank, the International Monetary Funds, and all kinds of agreements like NAFTA. The capitalist state gets all concerned with borders to control workers. What a contradiction. This has got to be fixed. Another issue is the self-determination of the Puerto Rican people. The US is a colonial country that defies its own history of fighting to be free from the British, but now colonizes others. The workers' movement has a dual task of embracing Puerto Rican workers in the US and then supporting the people on the island, backing their democratic desires through acts of self-determination. One of the great steps is to make sure we use Spanish as a language of record in what we do as a working class. It's time for us to embrace our class in all its diversity. And yes, this of course takes effort. Finally, at least in this presentation, is the need for workers to be united with women in their fight against patriarchy, the misguided notion that men are superior to women. In terms of public policy, this has to involve getting the Equal Rights Amendment passed, not only by maintaining congressional backing, but taking on the long march to the state legislatures. This is a battle that must be waged, must be won. Within the organization of the labor movement, the trade unions, women must be embraced as leaders, and all forms of gender discrimination must be taken on as priority issues to fight: pay levels, promotions, sexual abuse, and anything else. We need contract negotiations that cover the needs of family life around childcare and childbirth. Solidarity is key to our unity. Remember, an injury to one is an injury to all. Now, let me just review my main points. The first is that the day-to-day struggle is about fighting for change, making the reforms that are needed. Remember that most politics is about the struggle for the possible, choosing fights we can win. We need this to build our forces, to grow our strength. Of course, we will lose many battles, but at the beginning, we need to play to win. This is about measuring our strength, planning carefully, and striking when and where the masses are ready to take up the struggle. But it's with our vision that we fight on to new battles. With our vision, with our strategic goals, we can fight on whether we win or lose any given battle. Remember the key slogan that we advance by: fight, fail, fight again, fail again, and then fight on to victory. The Southern Workers' Assembly is a strategy for building a workers' movement in the South. From a national perspective, the SWA is an essential element in any national strategy. The most backward and right-wing forces have strong bases in the South, and that needs to be confronted and destroyed. Only a regional organization, organized working class can do this. Join us. The future is possible.